Welcome to Employer Content Marketing. Today we're talking about employee advocacy, or more to the point, what employee advocacy should be in this day and age. Algorithms changing, AI obviously impacting, LinkedIn changing to be more expert-led. The role of personal brand and corporate influencers means that actually employee advocacy is a great opportunity, but our organization's really leveraging it in the right way. So delighted to have Andy Lambert with me today to chat about this. How you doing, Andy?
I'm well, thanks, Chris. Good to be back on the pod. How are you?
Oh yeah, good, thanks. Good. I was thinking when we last did our episode, we were talking about this thing called GPTs, probably like 3-4 years ago. And look where we are now. So anyone who's interested in that conversation, it's still pretty fresh, to be honest. It's dated well. So pop to the description in this episode link somewhere and you'll be able to find it. But yeah, look, it's great to have you back on. Let's start off with those people who don't know. Give a bit of an intro about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I've always been in B2B, and particularly SaaS. In 2016, co-founded a company called ContentCal, which was a social media marketing software company. Grew that to becoming the fastest growing company in our category, which is quite a busy category. And in 2021, sold that to Adobe, which was pretty cool. And I spent the last 4 years building product at Adobe, working on a product called Adobe Express as a principal product manager. So been fascinating seeing how to create a brand new product and take it to market in the context of Adobe Express. So for the last 4 years. So it's been fascinating seeing product development at that level and being part of it. And as we were just telling you before we went live, I will shortly be leaving Adobe to do another startup. Yeah. Back around the cycle we go.
Good times, man. It's brilliant. Look, I think, we've been meaning to do an episode for a few months now, haven't we? And I think God bless LinkedIn as being a nice little reminder, because you posted something on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, which was about employee advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. And I think that we can talk a little bit about the book, your book, Spheres of Influence, which very much touches on what we're going to be talking today. So let's talk about employee advocacy. Should we start off with talking about what it's typically seen as, and then we can go into what it really is now?
Yeah, this is actually my favorite topic at the moment, to be honest. It's been my favorite topic for a long time. It's something that I've really wanted businesses to crack. For some reason, there's still some blocker here for businesses. I think philosophically, we understand what employee advocacy is or should be, but I think we've just got it a bit wrong. So we'll get on to that, I'm sure. Generally, what I think employee advocacy was always meant to be is, how can we build trust at scale in our organizations, build influence, and use the subject matter expertise of our individuals to appeal to our audience at scale. Because of course, the reach of our individuals is much stronger than just the reach of our company page in most instances. What it's turned into, however, is, hey, here's a boring corporate post we put on our LinkedIn page promoting, we're delighted to be speaking at insert conference name here, find us at booth 343, and post that to company page, and then encourage the rest of the employees just to repost the same corporate level guff, but at scale. Surprisingly, what you see is on the company page, there's 5 likes and no comments, or if there is a comment, it's from their employees. And what you see is probably a handful of those people that are signed up to the employee advocacy program, resharing the same thing, but getting 0 engagement because, of course, the content is dull. So that's unfortunately the delta between the promise of employee advocacy and generally for any business that even are dipping their toe in the water, that's pretty much what it turns into. Lowest common denominator stuff.
Yeah, for me, it's great to see organizations doing something, and I'm seeing more and more examples of employee advocacy programs being run in companies. There is always, in a lot of the cases, this feeling of the classic thing. Well, your employees have better reach than you do as an organization, but then there's this default to, well, if we have employer branding, we have templated content, and we're really just treating our employees as distribution channels.
Yes,
which feels a little bit, I don't know, bit taken advantage of, isn't it? I think that's just missing such tricks. So I think it's good that there's that appetite to tap into employee advocacy. But I think reason why the stuff you talk about on your books, Spheres of Influence, really resonates with me is this thing about What if we use those opportunities to not just, when we're capturing content, not just to sell the organization and saying this is what we're doing on this day at this organization, but to share the opinions and expertise, the knowledge, the stories, and the advice from your employees. Talk about Dan Pink's The Surprising Truth About What Motivates People. Mastery and autonomy over their domain is fantastically motivating for individuals. So yeah, I think it's such a good opportunity for organizations now to take it on another level, especially with, you look at LinkedIn being a very clear example of their algorithm change, to it being not just what you post, it's what your profile says you do and where you're expert at, and are you posting about that on LinkedIn. So yeah, I think that's for me a long-winded way of saying I think it's absolutely great that we're talking about this, for sure.
Yeah, your point about like the timing, because of course for anything to take hold properly, and I want to caveat this with, even though I sound slightly disparaging about the way that people use employee advocacy, it's still better than not doing it at all, right? But I do think we need to do a bit of breaking down and then rebuilding in this podcast episode, maybe, which will help kind of some of the reframing piece.
Exactly.
But timing is always essential for any behavior shift. And it feels right now the timing is particularly pertinent, where, to your precise point, Chris, the fact that LinkedIn ranks so highly in AI answers now is phenomenally important. So it's the number one cited resource for professional queries across all AI platforms. That is absolutely massive. I don't need to tell you that.
So good. It's so good. So good.
It's like,
finally at last.
Yeah, it's the justification, the business justification of like what we've known all along. Right. So this, unfortunately, sometimes you need the hard data to prove it. We know philosophically between us, because we've known each other for over 10 years now, which is nuts.
Yeah,
and we shared a very similar philosophy for the duration of that time, which is people buy from people. This is where trust and advocacy is formed. Everyone knows that. That is not a surprise. But for some reason, there's always been a mental block in businesses, because we typically go, well, we could get Bill from sales to post, or Megan from accounting to post about us, but company tone of voice, what if they say something incorrect? And we are always rooted in risk, fear, and all that kind of stuff. And I still get these questions today, and to a degree, it's not wrong, right? It's not wrong to question what the downsides are. Yeah. But I do want to declare this though, because it's really important. There is a very different conversation that we have about employee advocacy in the UK than we have with when I work with people in the US. Massive delta in terms of how people think about this. Okay, we're always a bit like, not sure I want to say this. How should we be perceived? Should we? And it just becomes a myriad of questions or barriers as to why we shouldn't, because we're so risk averse. We're so worried about putting ourselves in front of the camera and declaring our own missions, motivations, and ambitions, and all that kind of stuff. Our colleagues in the US, no drama, right? And that is, it shows a stark divide. I'm being deliberately provocative here, because I do think this is a time that businesses need to rethink it. Because yes, we've got all of this AI stuff. So if you want to be captured or cited in AI research, which apparently the latest data is like 86% of B2B buyers will go to AI to help and aid them in their research process. So if we're not in those AI answers, we might as well be invisible. Of course, it isn't just LinkedIn. I need to be clear. It's not just LinkedIn that's going to help you get cited there. Of course, strong SEO still matters, but we now have a compounding factor of LinkedIn. But it's really important that we call this out now, is that one, obviously LinkedIn is critical for us for our discovery. But the reason I call out the distinction between US and UK based businesses, all of the fastest growing businesses on the planet right now are typically coming out of the US. How are they growing? It is all founder brand, then their people, their subject matter experts, and their influencers, and then they're amplifying all of those. All of their growth, all of it is people powered. Yet here we are in the UK, still doing like standard corporate, like safe nonsense on LinkedIn and wondering where the growth is. And honestly, I can't be any clearer about the fact we are missing a massive opportunity. And I think it's now, I do sound very provocative here, but like,
No, good.
it's so clear.
I think it's important to be provocative because it is such a good opportunity. And it's about going, let's give people the chance of maybe breaking traditional industry expert, industry leading, employee advocacy to actually what it should be. Then I think that's we're doing our job, aren't we? Really, I think we look at we can talk about I think what it looks like now. Yeah, I think if we're thinking about this is relevant to any comms segment, really. When it comes to looking at leveraging personal brand from a B2C perspective, a B2B perspective, but also from an employer branding and talent attraction and talent retention perspective. Because ultimately, I see it as being personal brand. I might be simplifying it here, but personal brand is employer brand is ultimately personal brand at scale. You just need to make sure you have the right mix of personal brands in the right community, the right organization to move forward as a community and as an organization. That's how we're here as humans right now. is based on that. So let's talk about what employee advocacy, looks like now. And, happy to, chat about your wonderful book while we're at it as well.
Firstly, I would be the one calling for a rebrand of employee advocacy, which I think you would agree with anyway, Chris. Is like it's a bit more nuanced than that because we typically bucket everything under employee advocacy, and actually there's quite a lot happening in there. To your point, like when I say employee advocacy, if you work in HR or talent, you think about employer brand, right? Under the category employee advocacy. If you're a sales leader, you're thinking of like getting your voices active or your sales team active on LinkedIn, social selling. There's a lot of flavors to this, of which I generally bucket it under like personality-led growth. So either that's growth of the business or growth of it's all growth of the business, right? That's what we're trying to do. So it might be in terms of revenue or high quality employees, whatever. So what does a good version of that look like, where we've rebranded it and it's not about employee advocacy, which kind of just in the notion says like, I'm doing something for my company and I'm doing something in servitude of them, which isn't right? Because, that immediately undermines authenticity because, oh yeah, you work there. Of course you're going to say that. Yeah. Actually, what we really want is people's unique personal opinions on the matters that mean the most. So what does that actually mean or look like? So, you could look at this through the lens of a good example is to look at, I'm sure you got tons of examples as well, Chris. One of my favorites in terms of like the employer brand version of this is Bolt, the kind of mobility company. Yeah. They are phenomenal on this, founder down, right? And it's always typically starts right from the C-level. They have I couldn't do it no justice through words alone as to like, seeing is believing on this. Basically, look them up on LinkedIn, you'll get it. Bolt, very good. But then what does it actually look like from a systematic perspective? So number one, we got to focus on who our ICP is first. I think generally if we want to get this rocking and rolling, the best first place to look at driving an initiative like this is always in like sales and marketing, in my view, because there is a distinct outcome we're trying to get. And it's very tangible as to how we can drive that outcome. So sales and marketing, number one. And I think there's a few steps, which I actually just posted it on this framework on LinkedIn today, funnily enough. So all starts, find 3 to 5 voices that map your ICP. So for example, if you sell to marketers, then that means getting your marketing team involved with this. Simple as that, right? That's your simple start. Now, if you just try and ask them to post some stuff, to be like, yeah, talk about like your day or talk about like the things that you've learned, talk about your career trajectory. It's actually really hard unless you spend your days actually writing content for LinkedIn. You might, however, get lucky. You might have a couple in your marketing team. Let's just say you're focusing on marketing that already do something. Oftentimes you'll find the younger users in your organization will already adopt this. And in fact, I actually think like Gen Z is actually a real good, or it's actually creating some upward pressure on the C-suite about employee advocacy in general. You see this across like the big four accountancy players, where they're really pushing their grad schemes and their apprenticeship programs, and they're all massively active on LinkedIn. So there's a bit of upward pressure happening. Anyway, you might find some people that are already active to give you a fast start. But anyway, can't give them a blank page. You could write posts for them, but that kind of kills authenticity. You know, I do see some people taking that approach. My preferred approach is to interview those folk and sit down and have a 10-minute conversation with them, because believe you me, whilst people struggle to write, they do not struggle to talk. So you will have a whole bunch of insight from that. Once you've got that insight, then, you know, you're going to need a marketer's mind to then think about where the angles are, right? There's no easy way for me to articulate that. You're going to need that mind that goes, okay, there's an overlapping then between the expertise of your team and what works well on LinkedIn. That is the curatorial skill. You have this, Chris. I've spent the last 10 years thinking about LinkedIn and thinking about how these overlaps work and like what works well on LinkedIn. How do you balance between like the right quality hook, but not making it clickbait? You know, so there is a lot of nuance in that. But either way, but to your point as well, like, you know, it doesn't always we don't need to go viral either. We don't need to like optimize the hook and say, you know, we need to post at 8:31 and get this level of engagement. Like, we don't need to sweat the small stuff yet. It's just about getting an engine turning. And you already made reference to it, Chris, about LinkedIn's shifting algorithm. Internally it's called 360 brew. I don't even know why they called it that, but it is. I don't know if you have any insight on that one, Chris.
Maybe decided over coffee, maybe. Lots of coffees had while redoing the algorithm. Who knows?
What you need to know about the algorithm, if you don't know already, dear listener, is it just made LinkedIn feed much more relevant, right? So LinkedIn listened to the audience, which had been like, I'm seeing loads of like irrelevant drivel or like viral posts in my feed, and I don't want it. I want relevant stuff tailored for me. And that is why everyone saw their reach decrease on LinkedIn, which is fine. You know, it's okay. I would take relevance over reach any day. Once, you know, it doesn't look good in your analytics dashboards when you see suddenly your reach has gone down, but it is what it is. The point is that we now, as provided that we have like good quality bios, good quality summaries of our experience, and we post with a consistent narrative and a consistent target audience in mind, it means we're going to start reaching the right people, because relevance over reach. So that's what Brew and the algorithm change is all about. So that really serves the whole employee advocacy piece well, because it's less about people that are gaming the algorithm get reach. It's more about whoever has the most relevant, like juicy subject matter to speak about. Anyway, so where are we so far? So selected 3 to 5 voices. We've interviewed them. We've found the kind of overlap between their expertise and what will work well on LinkedIn. Then we take the ones that are performed well and we amplify them. Thought leader ads are crushing at the moment on LinkedIn. Absolutely. Obviously, you know this well, Chris. And I was actually in a thought leader ad presentation last week, and I was blown away. I knew they worked well, but like when I was looking at the data at the high level, how thought leader ads compare to, and from a CPM basis, compared to other LinkedIn ads. Incidentally, I've spent 10 years waffling on about LinkedIn, and I've never got LinkedIn ads to work well for us in building a business, never efficiently. Always CPAs were far too high, so we never scaled it. If we were building Content Cal and thought leader ads existed then, oh my word, it would have had so much of our budget, because it's personalities at scale. 100%. And then you get all of the wonderful goodness, all of the and this is the kind of secret sauce really that comes off the back of it, is that now using tools like Clay, which is a fantastic like enrichment tool, which feeds into like all of your CRMs and stuff. It can now take all of the engagers from your LinkedIn post, which you've amplified as a thought leader ad, and now you've got like 50,000 impressions on a post, and now you've got 100 plus comments. Now you can take all of those commenters, feed them into Clay, enrich them, so we can say, right, out of those 100 commenters, 10 of them are in our ICP. Feed them through into HubSpot or whatever CRM you're using. Boom. You then actually have a go-to-market engine where it's not like oh, let's do some LinkedIn posts and like, hey, impressions were good this week. Or it's like, no, this is now an actual meaty, tuned engine which drives growth. And I think we're now at that point where that's why I feel so passionate about taking LinkedIn seriously, because it is a go-to-market engine which is actually defensible. And it's very hard to find defensible ways of going to market when new businesses are being created at a record rate right now.
100%. Oh my goodness. Like, it's so exciting. Really. I mean, goodness, we could have a whole other episode talking about AI and what Claude Co-work is doing, and like platforms like Manus who can go out, and these agents that can go out and research things based on data like you talk about from LinkedIn. And I think LinkedIn is a good reference point as a very standout example of where things are going, but also guides for what you do in other platforms as well, you know. But I think, so shout out to Caddy Pole at Bolt. I've met her at EBCon.
Oh, did you?
In Bucharest last year, and she gave a presentation about what they do. And she comes from this kind of social media and media background, so she really gets it. And so I definitely back up what you're saying about looking at what Bolt does. They're fantastic. And also, I really like what you say about finding those employees and actually asking them to participate, because there's another thing around employee advocacy, which is having software, and there's lots of good platforms out there, definitely. And there's absolutely a role for this, which is, here's a brief on what we want you to film. Can you just film it? And great, that goes somewhere in the cloud. And then you, as a central point of management, can then turn that into content that's is employee generated content. But I think we can't just rely on that. I think because that places the onus on the individual to come up with something, and they're busy people. So I think there's this extra piece here, which is this kind of media producer type mindset, which is going, we would like to grab some of your time, either online for an hour or 30 minutes, or in person, because we're going to be in a studio, we're going to be at this office at this time, where we want to talk to you about certain things. You've got some experiences you've got, there's some opinion you've got. What advice would you give to people when it's about working in an innovative company? What are the difficult things about working in an innovative company? Those things is great, because then literally you're like a media company by going, right, let's gather that. So I think that's like such a fantastic opportunity, but doable. This is not blue sky thinking at all. But I think, should we, like, to kind of round this off now, should we talk about your book, Spheres of Influence, and talk about the spheres?
Mm-hmm.
So then I think that will really help people in terms of going, right, employee advocacy, I need to look at this, spend some time on it. And next time I have an employee advocacy meeting, or it is on my to-do list, I should be doing these things. So should we talk a bit about the book and the spheres of influence that you wrote about in your book?
Yeah, for sure. I'll explain what those 6 spheres are, because the whole book is written around those premise of that. And it's the book that I actually found it kind of hard to write, because I've been trying to put a language to how I'd built Content Cal before. And, you know, either luck or judgment, I don't really know, we had turned Content Cal into, like I said, the fastest growing company in our space. And the way we did that is by being the brand that came first to mind, basically winning mental availability. Obviously, that sounds great, you know, and everyone would love to do that. You know, how do you get everyone to think of you first when they go to market? And of course, you know, everyone didn't think of Content Cal first. That obviously isn't true. But in our space, we captured far more share of voice than we had any right to, especially for our size, and considering we're going up against giants like Hootsuite, Sprinkler, Sprouts. You know, these are, you know, multi-million, billion-dollar organizations in some instances. This is why I got to care so deeply about share of voice of a metric as like the ultimate leading indicator as to the impact that we're having or we're making in terms of broader marketing. Basically, if more people are talking about you than your competition, then you will win. You will win mental availability. You will be first to mind. You will see organic growth through your website traffic, through social and all that good stuff. And basically what that meant to me was like, okay, how do I get everyone to talk about us? How do we win word of mouth? And how do we build a word of mouth engine around a brand? So all sounds wonderful and utopian, but there is a structure to this. Those 6 spheres goes as follows. Like, number 1, the most important sphere that you can activate are your customers, right? So your early customers. And of course, I was building this from like a startup lens. So you might need to tweak some of these layers for your own context. But anyway, customers, your number one job, and honestly, marketers do not think about this enough, turn your customers into advocates. Every single customer touch point you have across your business is an opportunity for a moment shared on social. Like, for example, customer service is treated as a cost center. It really shouldn't be. It's the ultimate profit center. Every single customer interaction should be utterly delightful. And every single delightful experience a customer should have should then be like, okay, well, we'll give you then 10% off your next bill if you review us on G2 or Capterra or whatever research platform you're using. Because of course, they've just got more important because of AI, yada, yada. So use that opportunity because it's compounding. Number two, then we want to go to our employees. Once we've satisfied our customers, once we've got our customers talking about us, and then we've thought through every single customer touch point through a marketing lens, then it's about the second sphere, which is employees. Everything that we've just been speaking about, personality-led growth, where it's not employee advocacy, which is a kind of nice to have. Isn't it nice that we can, reshare a couple of posts here and there? No, it's a growth engine. So let's treat it like one. So let's resource it properly and give it the structure it needs so that we can become the next Bolt, for example. And we'll give someone like, it's Caddy, isn't it?
Yeah.
At Bolt, like someone like that, give them the latitude to explore this. And I think that's the important thing that Bolt's done. They've given her like the latitude, the psychological safety to go like, hey, this is what we're doing. Cool. So that's number two, employees. Number three, this is the bit I care so passionately about, is communities. In every one of your, whatever space you're in, there's niche communities for that. We might be in someone on WhatsApp. We might have someone on Slack. We might be Facebook groups, wherever they are. Spend your time making friends with community leaders and make it my mission in every interaction with a target customer. I'm like, we'll always ask, like, how did you hear about us? Number one, of course, standard marketer's question. But number two, what communities and groups influence you? And typically someone will say a new WhatsApp group I've never heard of. And then my next mission is to go find that WhatsApp group, take metaphorically take the owner of that group out for coffee or give them a free coffee in an online meeting, whatever, make friends with them, find a way you can collaborate. Because the more communities that you can get inside, the stronger and more defensible your go-to-market engine will be. Yeah. Give you a good example. We did a huge amount of work at Content Cal with a group called the Marketing Meetup. And I turned up at loads of their events. I was on loads of their webinars. I was in the community, basically because of proximity. Every time, and I watched this always unfold in their Facebook group, which they had at the time, when someone went on and was like, what's the best social media scheduling tool? 10 immediate responses, Content Cal, Content Cal, Content Cal, because it's like, everyone, no, we are first to mind. You win those small spaces. Focus on winning the small spaces, not the big ones, because those small spaces are compounding and defensible. So this is what people don't think about, because we always think like, how do we scale it to millions of people? True. No, small actions, compounding. And so where am I? Number three. So on to number four. Then it's niche creators. We all know about that, right? So this is niche creators, somewhere between 5 to 25,000 followers, where they've got real strong trust in a space, where likely they won't advocate for you unless they really like you already. So again, like with communities, take time to build a relationship. Don't just say, hey, I've got a product. Would you promote it? That ain't going to work. And if someone says yes, they're probably not the right person to work with. So that's where that kind of influence at like a niche creator level. So that's number four. Number five is more kind of macro creators. That's subject to whether you've got budget, that kind of thing. So, that's where we're looking for us. We've got all this stuff working at those five or four previous spheres. The fifth sphere is more about like, how do we get endorsement at scale? And number six is about industry experts. So that's going to people that are, in my space, which is like B2B tech, like this is like G2 Crowd, Capterra, this is Gartner. These are like the journalists that are often like that you want the verification of, which are often like the final check mark of a deal getting done, where, you imagine you've got a buying committee and they're trying to, people are debating, do I buy Content Cal or Hootsuite? Finally, immutable justification is like, oh, Gartner said content kills better for these 3 reasons. There's just fine. It's just done. Tick in the box. We're done. Those 6 spheres are the most powerful ways that we can grow a business in a sustainable way and win the deal time and time again. Anyway, long narrative. But
good.
anyway, you don't need to buy the book now because I've given it.
I think, that's, it's because ultimately, those 6 spheres in this book, are, any business can use them and usually adapt them. So anyone who's, say, if they're in employer branding or talent acquisition, or in internal comms, for example, can take these spheres and adapt them based on that. But I think it's like really nice framework to go by, especially when you're if employee advocacy is something which is a fraction of your role, or one of the many things on your to-do list, having a framework is really important, isn't it? Is those ingredients, it's the recipe that's going to help you get there. So I think anyone who's listening, from watching from from a people comms perspective, definitely either just go back and listen through those 6 spheres, or get the book as well and apply that to what you're doing. And I think it's really exciting what's going to come. I think the more that organizations who have access to employees to do employee advocacy, the more actually they are going to be the people who can help generate revenue in many different ways. What you talk about helps. I think is that business case of going to senior leader, going to top of the business, going, this employee advocacy isn't just a fluffy thing. It's nice to have. It's imperative. It's a strategic business asset for us, and it can actually generate revenue.
I would agree. Wow. And just on your point as well, Chris, just like for those folk, I appreciate we all operate busy lives and multiple different things that we got to do. But like if employee advocacy is just like one of those bits on your docket of things that you need to do, that's probably a sign that you need to escalate that conversation in the business to make sure that is getting taken seriously and gets funded appropriately. Because it's no small feat to make this stuff work. Possible for sure. More important than ever before, absolutely. But I'm not gonna lie and say that this is a flip the switch. This isn't running a Facebook ad. This is a lot more complex. But yeah, I just don't think a business can afford not to do this stuff properly now.
And I think from a employee branding perspective, this is, I can't help visualize this the way my mind's going, is but kind of the employee advocacy piece, employee advocacy plus, which is what we're talking about, plus, which is what we're talking about, sits more at the center of employer branding. And I suppose it goes back to the thing about personal branding at scale is employer branding, or a big part of employer branding.
Definitely.
Especially with the rise of AI, and particularly when it's never been easier to create any old content about your organization. Goodness me, that rich conversation you have with somebody in that, either online or in person, in that half an hour slot, gives you so much more to use and to multiply and repurpose through AI. It's just, I do it myself, and it's amazing. There's only so much you can multiply and repurpose a sales message. God knows I've tried it over the years. There's only so much you can do. So I think, it ticks many, many boxes. So should we just kind of quick one, so if someone's going into a meeting and maybe employee advocacy is the sole focus of that meeting, or it's maybe an agenda item, or it should be an agenda item, what should someone listening or watching kind of be thinking of in terms of positioning or repositioning employee advocacy fit for now?
Good question. So number one, go with the data, because data tells a story. So I've shared some of that earlier. Just look at some of the look at LinkedIn's latest research related to this to help them understand how buyer behavior is changing. So people are motivated or moved by story first, and then the proof points of that story. And I think over a 3-slide presentation, you could tell something pretty compelling of like the way that brands are getting discovered is changing, and it's changed quicker than any of us would have imagined or expected. And what used to be optional, or used to be the preserve of like forward-thinking companies where they would, make personalities out of their employees, this has gone from a nice to have to a non-negotiable. The reason for this is because of AI, because of decision making shifted to AI platforms. And amongst all of that, and a kind of double edge to all of this AI dominance, is the fact that increasingly humans are looking to other humans to make decisions. They want that authenticity. So I got a buzzword in there. They want the lived experience, right?
Yeah.
And that is increasingly what we're going to need to do. And I cannot tell you the impact it has when those personalities that we have been talking about through the context of this podcast in like a digital scenario, like on LinkedIn or whatever. But actually when those same people turn up at an event, that hits different, because people are like, oh, I want to meet Chris from Employer Content Marketing because I really love the podcast, yada, yada, or I love the LinkedIn stuff. Is the thing that absolutely changes a game, because that's when you really see the impact. And that's where the kind of the second order effects, especially in a sales context, the second order effects are massive, because I cannot tell you the amount of times I've walked into sales meetings, either metaphorically online or in person, where people are saying, tell this story all the time, where like people say, oh, Andy, aren't you the guy that does you're the guy that does the social media roundups?
Brilliant. Yeah.
And that's it. I know at that point, I'm walking out of that meeting with a deal, because they already trust me. They already know me, etc. So as long as I don't mess it up or the features aren't right for that prospect, they're probably going to close. And because there is, trust is hard won, and that is all we're trying to do. And it's going to get harder and harder for a business to build trust, because, like I said, the world has changed. Businesses are getting dispersed, and getting commoditized left, right, and center. I know it sounds like really dramatic. I don't like to sound over dramatic, but the fact is, it's never been easier to start a business. Disruption is rife, and you can't go on LinkedIn without seeing someone coming up with the next AI agent for creating ads. What's the net effect of all of that? The net effect is going to be harder than ever to reach people. People are going to get spammed left, right, and center, DMs and emails, yada, yada. Where is the last preserve of like humanity? So long as humans still make decisions, we need to preserve that humanity and find ways to reach those folk where they are, whether it's in those communities or on LinkedIn or on a podcast or whatever. But we reach those people through people, funnily enough. 100%. And anyway, as you can tell, I might need to do a bit of editing of my suggested pitch to this person.
No.
More than 3 slides there, but never mind.
No, it's good. No, and also I think from when you say this, what comes to mind is something I remember being at a tech conference, a breakfast round table, and talking about AI and how it fits strategically and operationally into an organization. And I had to raise the point: is like, is this a danger of AI being about doing more with less? But actually, isn't it about doing better with less? I think that's such a key thing. And more we can use those. It's authentic is still a good word. Lived experience, all of those things through the people who make a company, who make up a company,
100% agree.
Are the ones that will stand out. Definitely. Oh, look, there's a good reason I wanted to get you on the podcast back again, because I do love chatting with you. It's great. I really appreciate it, Andy. And I think anyone who's listening, drop into the links near this episode to go to the Substack with the article about this. Find Andy on LinkedIn. Continue the conversation, all that good stuff. And I think, if you've got Claude or you've got ChatGPT or you've got Copilot, just off the back of this episode, just start talking to it, going, if I'm looking at employer advocacy in a new way and how I position it with the business, how I can do it, how would I go about doing it? It's amazing what you get back from that kind of question. Not necessarily a prompt, but just asking a question of something that can help you. But appreciate it, Andy. Always good to chat.
And likewise. Thanks,
Chris.
Thanks, man.